Well, hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of County Talk. As you know, this is where we delve a little bit deeper into issues that are going on in our county. And today we are lucky enough to have a special guest. I'm Sue Hanson. I'm one of your three county commissioners. And we do these regularly just to sort of kind of help educate you, new residents, even people that have been here a long time, on issues that are of concern with the county and interesting topics. So I'm here with Steve Pope. Steve Pope is the general manager of the Uncompahgre Valley Water Users. And we have an upcoming water summit here on November 14th. And we just wanted to give you a sneak peek from Steve about the behind the scenes issues that go on with our water. One of the things that we know about in Montrose and Delta County is water is complicated. I mean, it seems like it should be you just turn on a faucet, but it's more than that, isn't it? So Steve is the general manager, but I wanted you to talk a little bit about your background because you have a rich, deep background in water. So tell us a little bit about how you got here.
Well, thanks, Sue. Yes, I've been involved in water in one way or another for approximately 30 years. I started out, obviously right in college, I just realized I didn't want to wear a suit and tie, and I got into a degree program for hydrology, and it took me to a lot of different opportunities. I've worked on environmental impact studies on Glen Canyon Dam's operations in the late 80s, early 90s. Moved back to Colorado. Began working intermittently with the Forest Service at times, but then I started a career with the Colorado Division of Water Resources. I was there 26 years administering water rights on the western slope in the Colorado River Basin as a water commissioner, and then later on as an augmentation plan coordinator, where we delve into the decrees and the engineering and the fine minutia of water rights and water rights administration relative to development, industry, commercial, all kinds of uses of water. So. And then after a career with the Division of Water Resources, this was a fantastic opportunity to finally deal with physical wet water and have the opportunity to move it around and actually provide farmers with something that they could use in large quantities. So
Interesting. So you've gone through you had the educational background, you've gone through the nitty gritty of the water rights issues and decrees, which it has to be like pulling a tooth, like that much fun. But so now you're on boots on the ground. You get to muck around and really understand how water does go and what happens.
So. And it's great because you get to actually see the result of moving that water around. Our producers and the crop yields and the challenges we have with weather and infrastructure and breaks and how we maintain a system of this magnitude and keep it flowing. That's the thing. It's just keeping all the balls in the air.
Right, and it's so complicated. I mean, I don't think that the new person moving to Montrose County, or even someone who's lived here but hasn't been involved in ag, really understands the elaborate infrastructure that has to happen in order to make water flow and get crops the water that they need. So can you give us a high-level understanding of how that water system works?
Sure. Well, we operate the Gunnison Tunnel. That's our primary piece of infrastructure. And it was, obviously we'll go into more detail in the water forum, but it was established, it was constructed between 1904 and 1909. It was the first Bureau of Reclamation project to be authorized under the newly created Office of Reclamation Services. And this tunnel delivers water from the Gunnison River into the Uncompahgre Valley. And then it subsequently flows down the Uncompahgre into 7 other canals that we deliver water to about 84,000 acres of farmland. We are the largest bureau operator of a federal project in the western slope, and then actually in the state of Colorado, largest irrigation system. We deliver right around our water. The water right that we convey through the tunnel is roughly 1,250 CFS.
So a lot of water coming through that, and a lot of water to manage. So, talk a little bit about. I know we're going to at the Water Summit we're going to hear a history of the Gunnison Tunnel, but it wasn't an easy project to get through. There was some consternation, and I think Montrose County had to really fight to get the tunnel here in the first place.
Well, sure, yeah. I mean, the challenges are number one. It's if you've ever been to the bottom of the Black Canyon, it's just it was a formidable project from a construction and engineering standpoint, but then financially, I mean, it was a task at that time in our country's development. I mean, the farmers just couldn't afford to carry that burden without the assistance of the federal government, and it took several iterations to make that come to pass.
What did it cost? What was
I believe the final was just a little under $2 million, but in 1900, $2 million was a lot, and it just
I wish
like,
it was just $2 million now too.
Yes, I wish it was. We can't do a whole lot for $2 million anymore.
Right. But that saved. I mean, that really defined how we see Montrose County now, because otherwise it would just be desert.
It would. We import probably a little over 60% of the water that's utilized in the valley and through that tunnel. And when I say utilize, we use and reuse the water several times. And so without that tunnel, the landscape would be completely different. Mm-hmm. We would not have those fields. We would not have anywhere near the economic development that we've had in this valley otherwise.
So I want you to go back a step when we think about reusing, because when we think about water, we think it just flows and goes, right? So it goes back into the river. But could you take us through that piece of where it's reused and
Sure.
how?
We deliver water through the tunnel, and I don't have a clicker to see the map, but we convey water through our South Canal, which runs when it comes out of the tunnel, it runs.
So let's
roughly.
Point to the
can
tunnel.
I point?
Yes.
The tunnel is this bold red line.
Okay.
It enters the South Canal. It runs approximately 14 miles south, and then it dumps back into the Uncompahgre, or is flumed over the Uncompahgre into the west, and all the water from that point runs north, and it's picked up in we have 7 major canals. Mm-hmm. The west, the Montrose and Delta Canal system. There's the Lotzenheiser, which is in the blue, and the Selig, the Ironstone, and the Garnet. And those, by the time we get down around the Selig, we've utilized all of this water coming through the tunnel, the mm-hmm. direct flow. So it's all the return flows that are coming back from irrigation that are then rediverted again and reused.
So return flows. I water my field. Obviously, some of the water goes back into the small ditch or the irrigation mechanism that I have on my property, mm-hmm. or something like that, and then it gets reused to the next system.
It either drops back into a drain, which is picked up in another canal, or makes it to the river, which is rediverted through another head gate. And that's just how our system is laid out. Out of necessity, our geography is not such that we can have. It's not flat. We've got all these ash mesa, the California mesa, different geologic formations here, that these little valleys that require us mm-hmm. to be very creative in our water management and how we move water around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if anybody, it is a study in and of itself, just when you see the siphons around town and in the country where you have to pipe it back up to get to a level, and then it goes to the next farm. It is pretty impressive what you all do.
And it should be noted, we do not have one pump. We do not pump one drop of water. It is all gravity fed.
Interesting.
At this point. So
one of the things that our Representative Mark Catlin always talks about is that his dad said, "Don't let the water go off the hill," because they wanted to reuse it on their farms, yes. Right? So, mm-hmm. But we do. Some does go off this because we have seepage, and we have a topography that really makes it important to understand the whole system. It's not as simple as we think.
It is not. And one of the interesting things is we really kind of focus, in some places, inefficiency for us is good. We need that water to come off the hill to satisfy.
You have to say more about that. Inefficiency is good.
It is in the sense that, when farmers, if they were to all have sprinklers or drip systems and just be able to water their field and not waste any water off the backside of their field, mm-hmm. then our system is reliant on that water going off the backside of the field to catch it in another ditch to supply it to the next farmer down low.
Which is why when we talk about in California or some of these, that's a whole nother discussion, but when people come here, they've pretty much seen sprinklers and not necessarily irrigation systems. And so it is hard to convey that not every field can use a sprinkler. Not every field can use drip irrigation. Or not every crop, I should say. Is that a true statement?
Yeah, we rely on those return flows, so we need that water to be reintroduced downstream, and we use their fields as part of our conveyance to the next field down. Mm-hmm. And one of the issues is as that water goes across so many fields, the water quality degrades, and so as you get further down the valley or further north toward Delta, it's the opportunity to put a drip system in is tougher because it creates its own complications with the water quality. It just doesn't allow it to be effective.
And also, just to clarify, water quality. I know that when we've tried to use a drip system with our irrigation, sometimes there's silt in there. Sometimes it's hard. You're always out there cleaning the emitters and things like that. Makes it really difficult and tempting to use municipal water instead of, or domestic water instead of irrigation water. Is that what you mean by water quality?
Yeah. It just doesn't. It's not. The turbidity of it. It's difficult to put into a drip or a sprinkler, and sometimes a sprinkler system even. It clogs up the jets. Or the drip tape, and the pressures are different, and it presents a lot of challenges, and it's hard to invest a tremendous amount of money in a piece of infrastructure and then always fight it as far as how to keep it running to optimally.
Before I ask you about your challenges, are you in awe sometimes when you think about the original guys that laid this out?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean,
we are a very soft culture now. I mean, these guys. It was their entire life. That is all. Their full focus was making this system work.
And I'm amazed at how when you see early pictures of Montrose, there literally was nothing, and then that water was like the breath of life and changed the nature of how people could make a living and how they could farm and be productive. So what are your challenges in trying to maintain this kind of? So first, let's just take a step back. You're the general manager, but you have a number of folks that we call ditch riders, and there's water managers. Take us through the structure.
Sure. We have a staff of about 40, a little over 40 people. So we have our water, true. I mean, I think it all lies on the boots on the ground folks. We have our ditch riders and our crew guys that are out there. They're administering the water to the different shareholders. They're maintaining the system. They're unclogging it. With these winds we've had recently, it's just the tumbleweeds coming in and continually something is either always being blocked, and we are trying to keep from flooding other people out. So those are the boots on the ground. That represents probably 50% of our workforce. And then we have our equipment operators that are out cleaning and maintaining the ditches and, again, fixing breaks. And really our office staff is very small. Most of it is, you can't outsmart water. You got to outwork it.
Yeah.
And that's what these guys do is they have to get out there day in and day out, regardless of the weather, and make sure that system is running optimally.
Right. Well, you have to have all those levels, and we've always, some for people that have irrigation on their property, their first introduction to you many times is, their ditch rider. And so that person is really important because they're also educating people. Hopefully, I know they've educated us on what you can and can't do. And if we had a misunderstanding of how much water we should take, then there's a shortage, we get locked down. I mean, there are some interesting processes that you have to adhere to, and it takes a lot.
It does. And that's, you mentioned, the challenges we don't have, even though we have a tunnel that produces a tremendous amount of water. The Gunnison Tunnel will only deliver enough water to irrigate our system at about a 50 to 60% allocation. So we rely on the Uncompahgre Basin to make up that difference to give us a full allocation of water for that year. And in some years, more recently, the last 20, with the variable hydrology and the climate, we haven't been getting that water. So we do have to go to percentages just to make the system work.
So let's talk a little bit about that. So, people will hear you talk about a call. Could you explain that in layman's terms?
So a call is when a junior water right is taking water upstream. A senior water right is not getting their full entitlement or allocation. And so we have to place a call. Usually it's through the Division of Water Resources. They are the organization that administers water rights for the state of Colorado. We would place a call on the river to make sure that all of the juniors would deliver their water to us, or curtail their uses to make water available for the seniors to use. Recently, and I say this in the last 4 years, the Uncompahgre Valley Water Users has entered into what we call a no-call agreement with Ouray County. Prior to that, if we were to place a call at the M&D Canal, which is our largest diverter, if we can see it on the map here, it is, this green it's roughly right in here.
Okay.
It is our largest canal other than the South Canal. It extends 34 miles. It carries roughly 550 cubic feet per second. When we were short of water, we would place the call at the M&D, and we would call out 80% of Ouray County. And so when we call them out, that means that they would have to curtail their uses until
So curtail, fancy word for saying cut back,
stop
stop,
irrigating.
like stop.
In some cases, stop or cut back.
And what
yes.
happens if they don't? If somebody,
Well, the state engineer, that's their job to enforce that,
Okay.
that they administer those water rights. They would shut those head gates back to allow the water to flow down to us.
but you can imagine if you're a urea rancher and you're expecting a certain flow of water, what impact does that have on them?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, because once you are curtailed, it's difficult to, seasonally, unless there was some heavy monsoonal flow rains or some weather events that you typically would be done for the year. So what we did is we entered into this no-call agreement where they would, Erie County acquired some water, and it's in Ridgeway Reservoir right now. It was actually, the original agreement is they would have portions of this, back when they were talking about Ramshorn Reservoir or the Cow Creek Pipeline, they would allow them to divert water into Ridgeway. They would make this water available to us in lieu of calling them out. And the last couple of years, they have purchased a contract with the Bureau of Reclamation to make water available in Ridgeway for our uses to prevent in lieu of us placing a call.
Right. So you kind of bought a reserve. Right.
They put up some reserve water and we utilize that, and we've agreed not to place a call on the upper Uncompahgre. And some years it works great. It's designed to kind of fill what they call the April hole, that early part of the year when the runoff hasn't quite kicked in yet, but we have a big demand down in the lower valley here for our producers are putting onions in the ground. They're getting their sweet corn going, and they need that water early.
Yeah, and the timing that's what it just is amazing to me is that when they need it, they need it.
Yes.
And I'm guessing farmers, when they can't get the water, they're not super happy. And I remember years past, it hasn't been bad in the last couple of years, but in the past where it's been severely cut back. And that puts a real crimp in production.
It does. And we're looking at, with these changing climate, patterns and weather conditions, we're seeing water come in different forms. Historically it's been snowpack, or what we like to call the frozen reservoir, which we can use later on. But anymore, it seems like we're getting the same amount of annual precipitation. It's just coming in these spring storm events where we're seeing a large percent of our annual stream or annual precipitation in a short period of time. And it's how we adapt to that, how we manage that. Those are the challenges that we're going to face in the future.
Yeah, that's an ongoing challenge. There's you have lots of challenges. I mean, you have to manage all this water flow. The other thing that I know that when the snow starts to melt up in the Uray in the high country, you get a surge, and so you have to do some management with the system. Could you talk a little bit about how that?
We have this diurnal that comes down, and so as the snow melts in the upper elevations, it typically melts during the day. It warms up during the day, but that high water that's melting, it shows up to our system in the middle of the night. And so we get these big diurnal curves that come down the river, and we have to make sure that, we don't send it all down one head gate to overtop the ditch. And we have to, it's a continual process of tracking that water and forecasting when it's going to hit certain head gates, to what extent it's going to hit, and how we're going to manage that water, while try to use as much of it as we can, being respectful of that without wasting it out the system.
So would you say that overall that our producers do a really good job of managing how they use water and how they share water and all of those things? I mean,
generally, I think that, we've changed over the last 30 or 40 years, actually probably 50, and we with these different crops is, we used to do a lot more crop rotations. These farmers would not, we had farmers that if they had 1,000 acres, they would, they grow a little bit of everything. They would grow some beans, they would grow some corn, they would grow vegetables. Now it's, with the markets, we have some farmers that, they are 100% sweet corn farmers, and that's so they have this huge demand. Each one of these crops requires water at a different time, and we're kind of getting away from that to where there's, if we get too many people in the same market, we get this huge stress or demand on our system, at one specific time.
Interesting. So, is there a conversation amongst farmers that say, "I'll do onions"? I mean, is it just?
I don't think so. I mean, it's a market. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't, and
They're
that's
gonna follow the
their
market.
businesses. They, you know, I don't know that any farmer grows any one crop because they love to grow it. It's just that at the end of the day, it's a business for them, and they have to
Get a
make that
return on their
tractor.
investment,
They
right?
have to make that tractor payment, and they have to make that seed payment, and they're going to sell whatever they can for whatever market, whatever price they can.
One of our speakers at the Water Summit is going to be Robert Cicada, who's going to talk about the next endangered species, which is farmers, because I'm continually concerned about farmers realizing that this is really hard work and there's probably some other ways to make a living. I'd sure like that never to happen in Montrose County. I want to make sure we keep that though. What other challenges do you find what keeps you up at night?
The main thing that keeps me up is, our system was put in, it's one of the original Bureau projects. Most of our canals are well over 100 years old. Our infrastructure is aged. And it's actually, not only is it aged, but it's been put on the Historic Registry of Civil Engineering Projects. And so when we go to, we can't just replace a siphon without going through some government hoops and the NEPA process and the cultural. And because it is a historic project, we have a lot of our head gates that were put in and they're stamped with the CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps. We can't touch those. So we have to work around it. I liken it to we're operating a museum, but we're trying to do it, productively, efficiently,
right?
And it presents some
You're
challenges.
like a tourist attraction that's still trying to operate as a system. It makes it difficult.
And the costs anymore of maintaining this system are crazy. I mean, it's just staggering, some of the costs.
But you're doing a lot of things for that. I mean, I know the drought management infrastructure plan. You're working on that. Are you going to talk a little bit about that at the Water Summit?
Yes, we will talk about our DMIP and then actually our role. We were fortunate enough in this. Was it 2023? They passed a piece of legislation. I think it was Senate Bill 295, and it was about the drought task force. And we were very fortunate to have one of our board members on that, representing the Western Slope on that task force. So we got to really, get firsthand information and have the opportunity to provide input to make some suggestions and recommendations for that the Congress or state representatives could use in their decision making. And we were so that was a very challenging time. I mean, when you have 25, 30 people in a room from a variety of backgrounds and perspectives to come up with a plan, if you will, that everybody could buy off on and still maintain some of these core values that we all agreed upon at the beginning, not to hamper our state's negotiations in the 2026 compact renewals and not to follow the state water plan and emphasize the importance of storage and accomplish those goals, but still come up with these recommendations. At times it was a bit of a challenge.
I'm sure. I mean, that everybody has a different perspective of what water means, and that's why we strive to make sure that people understand how important that is for Montrose County, and that how efficient you guys really are in terms of how you manage that resource.
Well, and we are in this, and also I think one thing that's really important to understand is, and unlike other water users on the Western Slope, especially in that scope and size of our system, if you look at the Grand Valley, they've got the luxury of they have the Colorado River running through their front yard, and they use the water once, maybe twice, and then it runs back to the river, where we have to continually rely on the use, reusing that water. We physically dry the Uncompahgre River up in Olathe most of the summer, and that's just our tape measure that says, hey, we're doing our job.
Right.
We're not letting anything go out of the system that is not used and reused. And
I think that's important for people to know too. That sometimes you drive by a Blue Mesa Reservoir, you get to Olathe and it's a trickle, or even the Dolores goes to a trickle. I mean, that's not part of our system here, but still, water is used for multiple uses. I mean, fishing and boating, but for water, for crops, for things that we need here. So I always thought, people go by, oh my gosh, have you seen how low Blue Mesa is? Yeah, that means farmers are using it. That's what it was made for, right?
Well, and not only that, I think the farmers are the ones that really, I think it's really important when you drive through Delta in January and you realize that there's only 40 feet CFS coming out of Ridgeway Reservoir, but there's 250 CFS flowing through the town of Delta, down the Uncompahgre in Delta. That water came from farmers. I mean, they've slowed it down throughout the season, and then now it's making its way back to the river, and it's keeping that river flowing throughout the winter months.
Maybe we should have some signs that say farmers are,
Well, and they are, and I think there's these co-beneficiaries. We help that. I believe. I firmly believe that farmers are some of the best conservationists.
Agreed.
Really, they manage their water and their resources as best they can, but it's for the benefit. It helps the stream. Some of the the co-benefits of our system, really, if you think about it, is we have this phenomenal whitewater park in our downtown. That's all tunnel water. If we were reliant on the Uncompahgre, people would not be paddleboarding in Montrose. They would not be kayaking.
The recreation would be a little different.
The recreation would be significantly different.
Yes.
And we can run that consistently and reliably all summer long. So you can base a actual economy on that because that you're going to have that water.
So that's really good, and people that are viewing this might have been on their paddleboard down or their kayak going down the park. That's because you do a release, or that the farmers are putting the water's going back into the river, and so it's flowing down to maintain certain levels. Correct?
Yeah, that is the lion's share of that water is the Gunnison Tunnel. I think that's one thing we cannot stress enough is just how important that tunnel is to this valley.
Yeah, which also brings up I thought when you said sleepless nights, you're going to tell me about how old the tunnel is, because it's an oldie but a goodie.
It is, and it's it's an old tunnel. It's roughly 6 miles long. Constructed between 1904 and 1909, and there's even the infrastructure on it. The gates, the head gates managing water that flows into the tunnel are aged, and it's just maintaining those in the historic format, but just keeping them operational, and dealing with the challenges there, and the ramifications if anything were to happen to that tunnel. I mean, really, we are the raw water supply for the valley,
right
now, and until they get a treatment plant put below the proposed plant that's going to go below Ridgeway Reservoir. I mean, we supply every drop of domestic water from roughly Ridgeway to Delta.
Important for all of us to know that, right? That hits home.
That's if anything were to happen to that tunnel, we would have a very short window of water supply, and then they would have to come up with some alternative, either pumping it out of Dry Cedar Creek, or some, depending upon the time of the year, there'd be some challenges. And
I think it speaks to how well the water users maintain that tunnel, and I know that it is old, but it's in good shape considering how old it is. And I know that Brody Wilson, he's going to speak about the past at the Water Summit. He's going to talk a lot about the tunnel. He's done a lot of research on that. So, but I got a tour, and it was quite an experience to get into that tunnel and to see how it actually works. So,
and it is. I mean, it's for just being a basic, just a big long shaft, a hole in the ground. I mean, it really allows you to appreciate the effort that went into that project.
No kidding. And I can't believe someone could come from this end and this end and then actually meet, because if I were doing it, it'd be
yeah. And I think at one time they were actually digging in 4 directions when they had to sink some shafts for ventilation and different things, that they had crews working in multiple directions. And they still tied it all aligned.
So it's
nicely.
remarkable, isn't it? That
is.
we didn't have half the technology that we have now that we can do that kind of engineering and construction. Well, do you love your job?
I do. I mean, there are, it's a job. There are some challenges at times, but it is it's a rewarding job. It allows people allows me to get out and interact with folks and actually, again, see the end product, when we drive through these farm grounds and see that these guys are actually putting up a crop, or when you have some sweet corn, we had a small part in it,
Yeah. a big part.
A part.
Well, maybe not the hardest part, but the water is a critical element, and I feel the same way. I feel very nostalgic when I go through the farm fields here, and thankful for the way the water works and how progressive you've been in terms of making sure that we understand the policy behind some of the things that dictate the water, and even not battling it, but pushing back when people don't understand. I know that you've been on tours where the California and Arizona folks from those projects have been here, and the way that they manage their water is very different from us, and I think you've done a really great job of communicating the differences.
Well, and education is so much of it. You have to understand that we operate our system completely different than most other people, and how it works for us, and understanding what works for them. But when people come in too, I mean, the development that we've seen in the valley too is one of the. You talked about the other challenges, and that's where we really get into a lot of it is the easements, and when you have a piece of property that may have historically been 100 acres and it was a farm, and the practice is you put the water at the top of the field and you start running it down and you gather it up and you irrigate all the way through the field, and now that 100-acre field is owned by 10 different people, and they all want their water at the same time, but there's not an infrastructure to deliver that to them. How we navigate that. How they navigate being neighbors and helping each other manage their water is a challenge.
But you're seeing more of that, aren't you?
We see
Neighbors,
a lot of that.
Conflict.
We see a lot of that. We see a lot of, our easements. That's the challenge too, is, people don't quite understand that we have an easement. If their canal runs or a ditch runs through their property, we need space to get in there and to clean that ditch, to burn it, to keep the trash out, or keep the water flowing through it. And it doesn't always align with their, goals of their property, but that canal or that lateral has been there since
it's a functional
1800. Most of our laterals in many ways have been there prior to the system. They came off the old ditches, and so that's the challenge, is to kind of conveying that to the new landowner. This is how this system works. It's not just your piece of property. It's the entire system.
So I wonder, we've struggled with the Water and Land Committee just trying to figure out ways we can educate people more and more. It's almost like they're not ready for that information until they're trying to put a water fountain in and use irrigation water or something like that. So it's a perfect storm for more discussions and conflict with water. But just in wrapping this up, well, first of all, you'll be a speaker at the Water Summit. Thank you for that. I think that we always love to hear from you and what's going on with the water users. What would you leave us with in terms of where you're going to take us on this journey for your talk?
Well, I think we're going to look at, again, the 30,000-foot view of our system and a little bit of the history, but how we navigate some of our challenges today and where we look into the future, and how we're going to tackle that with growth, with market conditions changing for the farmers, with climate impacts of hydrology, and how we're going to navigate those future demands for a scarce resource.
Right, and it's not going to get any better. We have more people moving in. We have water issues in terms of shortages and things like that can happen. And so it does take a really innovative ways to manage that water and that resource. So, well, thank you for taking the time to chat with me. I always learn a ton when I talk to you, Steve. I'm really delighted that you could take time to come and chat with us. Any final words?
No, I'm just looking forward to see everybody on the 14th.
Me too. Great. Well, please join us at the Water Summit on November 14th. It starts at 8 o'clock. Doors open at 8 o'clock. Of course, there's breakfast and lunch. But more than that, thank you for continually watching our County Talk episodes. I learn a lot. I hope you learn a lot. And if you have any questions about water, feel free to contact Steve Pope at the Water Users Association. He's happy to answer any questions. But you can come to the Water Summit and you can ask him there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue.